Good afternoon. So I guess I should start with this time. I was always told never apologise when you're doing a presentation, okay? But I'm going to start with 3 apologies. 1, you've got me again, I'm sorry. 2, I know you've just had a nice lunch and it's nice and good to have a little doze afterwards, so I'm going to try and keep you awake. And thirdly, we're also running a bit late today as well, so I know about that, but again, this presentation, this bank, your bank, Atlantic Global Asset Management's bank, will really, I guess, keep you interested and help you understand where it is that we're going. So, I think it was mentioned in the first presentation this morning that Atlantic Global Bank is one of the major ways that AGAM plans to develop over the next 5 years and beyond. It's an important step, and you'll see more, I hope, about how that sort of blends in with the whole approach. And it will also tie in with many of the aspects that I was speaking about earlier about fintech. So we've already established from the fintech presentation earlier, it's a very fast changing world, and the speed of change just seems to get faster and faster and faster. If you look at any 10-year period over the last century, whichever 10-year period you look at, the next 10-year period, the progress is faster and faster. And it's now come to the extent, we're back to this exponential curve that I spoke about earlier. The speed of change is so rapid, and we have to keep up with that. And I was saying that the smart players in the financial world have understood that and are doing something about it. AGAM understand that and is doing something about it. So we need to find our place in the world. Robots are taking over from people in many different ways, whether it's proper robots or it's just sort of machines, whether it's in factories or whether it's in domestic cleaning type activities or whatever. Modern megacities and special places like the Palm are sort of growing amongst the desert, and artificial islands are being created, and all of these things that nobody would have dreamt was possible just a few years ago. New generations, I mentioned earlier about sort of my children, your children, have a different expectation in life about what is possible and what should be possible. And if it's not possible, well, make it possible. It's no longer acceptable just to say, sorry, it can't be done. And businesses need to be flexible, and they need to look at the challenges, and they need to have that extra edge on performance in order to beat their rivals and to continue to grow. So, again, just like the last presentation, this presentation has quite a lot of detail in it. So again, I'm going to go through and give you the overview, but you can ask the organisers afterwards for the actual presentation, and then you can look at some of the detail should you wish to do so. But I hope my presentation now will give that balance between enough detail but not too much. So, the world economy. Obviously, different countries, different regions of the world all grow at different times. And yet, what we've seen already is that many emerging economies are growing more rapidly. And that's because in many ways they have the advantage of not having to throw out the old, they can just bring in the new. But also, there's a sense of catch-up. They can see the more developed economies here, and maybe they're here, and so that whilst the older economies are still growing, the new economies are having to grow that much faster in order to catch up. So we're seeing a lot of different focuses, albeit that some of the newer economies are a bit more prone to financial shock. But if we look again just at some of these numbers, and that sort of underlines what I've just said. So world output is somewhere around the 3.4% growth according to the IMF, whereas the 3.4% is a global outlook. If you look at the more advanced economies, they're 1.8%, and if you look at the emerging economies, they're 4.6%. So again, there's lots of disparities between which particular country you might look at in either of those two sectors, but broadly, there's a lot of growth amongst the newer economies, and therefore, there's a lot of opportunities there also. So these next few slides do provide more detail on some of the obvious economies. The UK, okay, I guess it's first and I'm English, but that's sort of coincidence. But the UK is a major financial world player. And then the US and the Eurozone. And then we have more detailed information on China and Latin America and some of the other economies. So I won't go through those in detail, but you get the picture that they're all growing at different paces, but in general, the emerging economies are growing that much faster. So what are the challenges in setting up a bank? Why are we setting up a bank? What are the challenges that we are going to face? And more importantly, if you think back to the whole different approach with fintech, that different approach being not, well, what are we doing, what do we want to do, and how do we make you customers possibly fit with what we want to do? It's a case of how do we understand what you as customers want, and how can we deliver that? And that's the biggest challenge, and that's what we're wanting to try and achieve. So those different challenges, though, I keep saying, bring many new opportunities. And those new opportunities are for many players, but the ones that will be most successful are those that are most flexible and have the most modern business model, the most flexible, the most fintech-minded business model, rather than the old-school business model. So to pick on some of these, we've got the technologies are developing rapidly. We've got the younger generation that I've mentioned before, just showing a very different behavior, a different set of expectations, if you will. You've got the fact that the banks themselves have accepted that they can't rely on traditional payments channels. Interest rates are at a historic low. Non-financial institutions, so NBFIs, non-bank financial institutions, are demonstrating better adaptability. And you're seeing that in very specific sectors of the market. So lending to micro and small and medium-sized enterprises, where non-bank financial institutions are really making a mark. Why? And the reason why is because they're very much focused on that different type of decision-making process, that different credit scoring process, that different approach, and a much quicker, speedier response. So it's all of these different challenges that we need to be aware of. There's no point in setting up another traditional bank just to perform the same old duties that the old banks used to. So again, the traditional banks are just not keeping up with the pace that they need to. Some are trying, but even investing millions, billions of pounds, they're struggling because they still have what used to be considered to be a big asset for them. Their costly fixed asset infrastructure base is now seen as a big drag on them being able to change direction. But it won't be a surprise to you today, given what I've spent the last hour talking to you about, that I'm going to pick on payments and fintech challenge. We really do believe that this is the one area that we need to focus on to do something different, to be extremely successful. So consumer preferences are rapidly changing. Retail customers now expect to be able to integrate all different types of e-commerce and social media and retail payments. So again, it's back to that whole merging your Facebook and your payments and everything else all at the same time. And they expect to be able to switch from one to the other seamlessly. Gone are the days that they want to use a bank for this and an insurance company for that and a phone for that. They're looking at doing everything all together. And by using the right fintech platforms, we and other players can actually achieve that. So, Atlantic Global Bank. It is, as I've said, part of the AGAM larger framework. And it's going to be different. And it's going to be different in a number of ways because it needs to be different. At the moment, you have broadly old type banks that are struggling hard to become new banks. You have many fintech type organizations that are focusing on being fintechs. But what we're trying to achieve, and what I'm confident we will achieve with Atlantic Global Bank, is a merger of the two. So it will merge some of the better aspects of traditional banking, but with all of the better aspects of fintech. So first of all, it's going to have a global presence. Because of the fintech approach, there aren't going to be any borders. So it will be able to transact business in North and South America, Europe, Asia, CIS, anywhere in the world because of that reach of the financial technology platforms that we've mentioned at some length earlier. Its advantages, as we've said, are in payments, in cryptocurrency, in lending, in brokerage services, all of those things that you're now experts in, and I will test you all on as we leave this afternoon. It's also going to provide a classic banking service, but it's going to be a special type of classic banking service. As I've said, only the best bits. We don't want to get bogged down with the older parts that didn't work so well. So, again, the primary target markets are the ones in blue, and the secondary target markets are those in green. That's not to say that we'll be ignoring the other parts, but it's simply that they are the parts of the world where the biggest and first opportunities are. So, the bank is going to be established in Grenada. And there's a number of very, very good reasons why Grenada. Some of which will be obvious to many of you, some of which perhaps might not be. I guess the most obvious one is tax, one way or another. But as well as tax, or lack of tax is the best way to describe it, there's a whole range of different reasons. So those reasons include, in that part of the Caribbean, the Eastern Caribbean, they have a very highly integrated financial service sector and economies. So it makes it not just a small island, but it makes it a bigger group of islands. They have a very progressive offshore business and banking approach. The government and everybody there is actually wanting to go out of their way to be helpful and to help us to do this. So again, unlike many of the more traditional markets, it's not a case of, oh, well, it's another bank, or well, we don't really want to help. They're actually very interested in working with us. The favourable tax policies that they have there cover almost every aspect of tax that you can imagine. A little later on, there's a slide that gives you a bit more detail on that. But again, one of the other really important aspects of why Grenada is that it gives easy access to the markets of the US and Great Britain and Latin America and other important markets for us. The legal system is based on common law, based on the English common law system. And again, I don't know how many of you have been involved in large syndicated loans or anything like that, but English common law is often the law of choice because it's a law that everybody feels comfortable with working with. So it's a very good, it may not be England, but it's based on the same legal system. I've already talked about the sort of the virtual reality of having the connections with Europe and the US, etc. But it also has extremely good direct flights to those parts of the world. So if you do want to go there for whatever reason directly, physically, it's also quite easy to get to, despite the fact it's not a large place. So, again, you can read some of the details later on, perhaps, but I think the one thing that I would draw from that is the major language. So, again, apologies for being English, but the major language is English, and English is the major language of finance worldwide. It may not be in this particular country that you come from, but in terms of worldwide finance, it's like being an airline pilot. If you want to be a commercial airline pilot, you have to speak English. And it does give such a good advantage compared to some of the other jurisdictions that you might look at setting up another bank. And then we have the economy. So it's not a massive economy. I wouldn't stand here and pretend that. But it is a very stable economy, and it does have a very stable government. And these are two things that a bank, a financial market, gets very comfortable with. So Atlantic Global Bank will actually bring big business to Grenada, and it will bring big international business. And these are two things that the government wants to see. And it already has positive economic trends in that stable economy. But again, we feel that we're going to be a major player and we will be able to assist A, in the economy, and B, in those positive trends. So again, there are various slides here talking about the specific aspects of the economy as it stands at the moment. So whether that's agriculture or manufacturing, and showing you what the economy is actually doing at the moment. So on the face of it, you could be forgiven for thinking that it's quite a small country, quite a small economy. So again, there might still be a little part of you thinking, why Grenada? Despite what I've told you already about the good reasons why. But it might be a relatively small country, but it has some very big friends and some very influential friends, and it's a member of all the best clubs. So a whole list of different international and regional clubs that it belongs to. United Nations, the IBRD, so that's the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the International Monetary Funds, the World Trade Organization, and as you can see, the list goes on and on. So a small country, perhaps, but with punching well above its weight, shall we say, in terms of what it's already capable of doing. One of the other things I mentioned 10 minutes ago was it has a very integrated economy with other countries in the Eastern Caribbean. And because it is an integrated economy, it actually adds a lot of strength and depth in many ways to that economy and what we as a bank being established there will be able to do. So we're not looking just at Grenada, we're looking at the wider region. And I think the organisation of Eastern Caribbean states, which is this collection of countries in that region, that their integrated financial system has a common currency, and even more to the point, it has a common central bank, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. So again, all of these preconceptions we might have had about it being a little small, it actually isn't when you start to look at it. It's a member of all the big clubs, it's got a lot of big friends, it's got much more regional pulling power than you might imagine at first glance, as it were. I've already mentioned that it's easy to access different markets, whether that is electronically, virtually, or whether it is physically. But I think one of the other really interesting points that might get some of you to sit up and take a bit more notice is that it's also one of those many countries around the world that offers citizenship if you invest in a business. So if you invest in a business out there, you are given citizenship. And if you are the holder of a passport from there, it allows you to travel to 121 countries worldwide without a visa. And this number of countries is growing all the time. And I haven't done a direct comparison with where that sits in the league, but 121 is pretty big compared to the vast majority of countries. The biggest number is 173, which is Germany at the moment. But Germany, UK, those countries are around the 170-ish number, and then coming all the way down to just a handful. 121 is a really significant number, and by investing in the country, it's relatively easy to get citizenship and to get that passport. So of those 121, I guess it's not a surprise to hear that includes the USA, UK, Hong Kong, Singapore, the whole of South America, many, many countries that you will want to be doing business with, you then get access to without a visa. It's also a very well developed and trying to develop even more financial centre. And I've said that they're already growing, but it is again the reason that they're very interested in talking to us about what it is we're doing. Because they themselves are extremely interested in looking at developing that whole process. They're trying to strengthen their own economy, they're trying to strengthen the legislative offshore base. And all of that means that, again, just as we've talked a lot this morning about being partners, effectively it enables us as the bank to have some sort of partnership type relationship with the bank, and with the government. And I mean by that simply that they're going to be on our side trying to help us to develop that. So I hope that even if at the outset you were a little unsure, I hope that by now you've already understood all the reasons why it is such a good place for doing business. There are many advantages, as I've already started to go through. But if you were to look at that list, the word tax appears in many of them. So tax exemption, absence of tax, absence of profit tax, absence of transfer tax, lack of business tax, etc., etc., etc. So it's a good place to do business, and it's a good place to become profitable, and it's a good place to retain that profitability rather than paying it away in taxes. So it is literally everything, every type of tax. There is one that doesn't actually say an absence of tax, but it is 0.59%, so I guess we can just about live with that. But overall, it is a very favourable business environment for investors in whatever form that takes. I've mentioned before that it's stable. You've seen that it's attractive. So what actually makes it so attractive? And it is the fact that it is attractive that helps it to become stable. So it's a virtuous circle. So the offshore zone is progressive. It is wanting to, just like the approach to fintech, it's not wanting to stand still. It's not wanting to think, what should we sort of do by making small changes. It's actually wanting to be progressive, be dynamic, and make some real difference. And this is done by not just the government having an open mind, but there is a whole lot of professional services. So lawyers, accountants, insurance agents, and everybody that makes good business work efficiently. All of these play a very decisive role in the development of Grenada, and it makes it a very competitive offshore market. So specifically, those areas that it lends itself to are, mentioned here, the registration of international trust funds, international insurance and registration services, offshore banking, registration of international companies, and registration of mutual funds. So all of the things that AGAM is interested in, all of the things that were being presented to you first thing this morning. So again, a very good fit in terms of having our own bank and in it being placed here. Perhaps one of the interesting things on this list of banks, and it isn't a terribly big list. But what was I saying earlier about looking at something and not looking at it how it stands, but looking at it and where are the opportunities? So where are the opportunities? We establish a bank here, we become a very major player. So it's not as though we won, there are 500 odd banks in the City of London. There aren't 500 banks here. If you establish a bank here, we are a big player. We're somebody important. We're a big fish in a rapidly growing pond. So it's, again, it gives us extra advantages over and above what you would have if there was much more competition. In fact, I've mentioned the government a few times, and the government is actually potentially looking for a partner in order to attract investment into any sector that the bank will be looking at doing. So it's very, very interested in working with us because it wants us there. And again, working with a partner that wants you there is so much better than working with somebody that either doesn't want you or perhaps doesn't particularly care one way or the other. So what are the actual aspects? What are the core aspects that we are going to be bringing? Down the left-hand side, I guess they're all fairly obvious, but let me pick on a few of them. Integrity. In business, trust is extremely important. We all have a shared belief in openness, transparency, confidentiality. We want the bank, just like the rest of AGAM, to be to have integrity, to be known for that quality, and to draw people there because of that. But we also need to have innovation. Just as I was saying before, we will be having that mindset about how do we apply, how do we find a solution for what people want. We're going to be innovative. We're going to be proactive, not reactive. And it's going to be very much results-driven. So the bank is going to be committed to delivering excellence, and it's going to be committed to delivering strong, prosperous, long-term relationships. We want clients to grow with us. We want clients to stay with us. We want clients to recommend us and help us grow because we are helping them grow. So again, it's this 2 + 2 = 5 that I mentioned this morning. And all of that centers around putting the client first. So this is, I guess, where we bring in some of this old banking type approach. So it is going to be highly personalized, premium service. So we're going to be using all the modern ideas, all the fintech, all of the technology, the modern approach, the what's the problem now, let's find a solution type approach. But it's very much going to be focused around our clients and working with them, making them feel special, making them come back, making them recommend us. So what are the benefits to each of us? I guess the whole reason for doing this bank is that, isn't it? What are the benefits? What are the benefits to Agam? What are the benefits to you? And what are the benefits to the clients? So some of the instant business type benefits are things like instant wire or money transfer, taking just 5 seconds. So again, instant is the word, not a few days, or like my little story I was mentioning earlier about transferring money and it taking weeks going backwards and forwards because of a little problem. But you are going to be able to get cash from an account in more than 10,000 places around the world. We are going to be providing Visa and MasterCard payment cards, for example. So it's again, it's a marriage of the old and the new. And so these are perhaps some of the, I suppose, some of the technical benefits. But the real benefits should be seen as how does that enable the client to do their business better, quicker, more profitably. So it's really a means to an end. It's not just about what are the benefits to be seen boldly like that. It's what does that lead on to. Like any good business plan, you need to do a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. And we looked at this, and if I pick out, again, just a few of these, some of the obvious strengths I've already mentioned. So you've got favourable political and financial regime and work well with the US and the UK and many other countries. And an extremely favourable tax regime. The whole process of what I've said we want this bank to be is, again, this middle one of opportunity. We want it to be one of the first banks to merge the fintech innovation and classical banking experience and client servicing quality. So client first, happy client, client comes back, recommends us to other people, and we achieve that by using all of the advantages of fintech. And the reason that we did the fintech presentation earlier was so that you could start to understand the importance of that in how that impacts on this bank, what we will do and what we will all do together. Threats. So yes, there's high competition in fintech and the banking market. And we've seen it's a market that is growing. So how do we react to that? We aim to be better and more personal than the competition. We aim to be a bank that you and your friends and your colleagues and the clients and their friends and their colleagues recommend to other people. And whilst there is high competition in fintech and the banking market, as we've already seen, if you get it right and you're on the crest of this wave and you're in this exponential growth curve, the opportunities are very, very large. And we believe that by taking the approach that we have, that we are perfectly positioned in order to do that. And so, in theory, you could say it's a threat, but yet again, look around you, look at where the position is, and then look at what are the opportunities from that. Always, always look for where is the opportunity. Now, setting up any company doesn't happen overnight. We've already spent a lot of time and effort in where we've got to so far. This tries to give you an indication of the timing, because I'm sure it's something, in fact I was even being asked at lunchtime, but I'm sure it's something that is of interest to you, because I know that by now you're already thinking, this is going to be really interesting for my business. So how can this bank help me to develop my business? So where we are now, we're, as I say, done an awful lot of the groundwork. And then we're in the process of incorporation and obtaining the banking license and submitting documents, and you know what it's like. Any business, lots of pain to go through, especially when it comes to something like a bank. When you haven't just got the normal pain, you've got a lot more of the regulatory processes to go through. But we expect the bank, broadly, if you look at this, to come down through to being fully operational sometime middle of next year. So it depends, obviously, on a whole number of different matters, but we think this is a reasonable timescale, somewhere along there, but third quarter or so of next year, once we've managed to progress. Just like any business, we've been through all of the business planning and all these sort of stages. And as I've said, it's not a quick process, but so far it is all going to plan, and we are where we think we should have been on that timescale. There are three core pillars for the bank. So one is focused around clearinghouse for payments and e-money exchange and electronic money institutions, cryptocurrencies, that sort of sector. The other is service provider for fintech clients globally, which is why fintech is so important to us, because we're not only looking at using it in our business, we're looking at helping use it for other, to work with others in their business to provide those services. But also, as I said, we are looking at providing a classic banking products, but with a very specific, high quality, high level of service sector. So if I very briefly run through some of the those cores. So clearinghouse service, it is to provide settlement and clearinghouse service for electronic money payments for institutions. At the moment, so many of the existing banks use old, outdated technology, whether it's SWIFT or ACH. They're all too slow, they're all too expensive, they're old style, and they cannot service fintech or cryptocurrencies. So we're looking at sweeping all of that away and setting up the new wave of fintech that will enable us to do things quicker, better, cheaper, faster, and therefore provide a better service and make the businesses want to use us because of the actual benefits that delivers to them. We're also looking at providing processing services on a multi-brand, multi-country, multi-currency, multilingual basis. So again, as you can see, multi is the words to take from there. We're looking at being a real global presence in every way. So it would support all of the card brands, all of the card types, and all of the existing and emerging payment technologies, so contactless and NFC and the like. So again, not just going in where the banks are and then trying to adapt it, but going in at a much newer level in order to leapfrog where they are. We're also looking at acquiring e-commerce and online gambling and other such e-commerce sort of movement of monies and assets. And if you look at this, the global market is 1.5 trillion US dollars, trillion. And we've set ourselves a goal of looking to take 1% of that market in 5 years' time. So 1% is a very realistic sort of number. And you may think, if I just said 1% first, and I hadn't have said 1.5 trillion, you might have thought, well, that's not so exciting. But 1% of $1.5 trillion, I think, is very exciting. And again, on all of these, look at the forecasts for where we are on the graphs on the left. We're also going to be offering a peer-to-peer lending marketplace. And again, you're all experts now on what peer-to-peer lending is and what an important part of the fintech sector is, and how big that market is and how rapidly it is growing. We intend to be a part of that by providing a platform, as it were, for others to be involved in that. So again, looking at how we can add something to what's already there. In a report published by Morgan Stanley in 2015, it said that the P2P lending was predicted to go from 150 billion in 2015 to 490 billion in 2020. So a big increase. But I actually think that's a bit pessimistic because it actually grew 53% during the previous period. So it's growing rapidly. But if you look further down, the Europe's alternative finance market grew by 92% in 2015. So these are big numbers with big growth. And all of these charts that I'm showing you on these next slides are showing the same sort of growth level for where we expect to be over a 5-year period. Foreign exchange trading. So we're looking at enabling you to trade FX online in a quick, transparent, reliable manner, and likewise for cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. So all of these things are where the world is going, and we intend to be jumping straight into that world and doing it from the outset, which gives us an enormous advantage from those that don't have the knowledge or the experience, and those that don't have the, or should I say, have the existing legacy of the fixed assets of the older banks. Private banking. So look at some pairs of words there. Private banking, tailor-made, classical banking. That's the part of the market that we're looking at really giving the old-fashioned type of banking to, but providing them with a new part also. So each private banking relationship is unique, it says. And I think that's very much the point. Every client wants to and should be looked after individually. So we have a keen understanding of the markets, of the dynamics of secondary residency, whether you want to invest into Grenada and get citizenship, whether you're looking at investing in other places, what the legislation is. So offering, again, a global service. We're looking at leveraging those results and providing portfolio management and trading expertise, and sort of combining all of these different things, the old and the new, the private banking and the technology, in order to provide a really first-class service, again, to help the client to maximize their profitability, to keep their profitability, to recommend us, to help us grow the business, and for us to grow their business. Money market products, foreign exchange, futures, trading contract options, all fintech is related one way or another, whether it's in energy exchanges, agricultural, soft commodities, precious metal, currencies, stock indices. You're going to be able to trade futures in all of those and everything else. So it's just a very large trading platform, and again enabling us to offer what it is the client is looking for. Fiduciary and trust services, classical trust services, wealth management, all of these areas. But again, I come back to still the classical banking service also. So I guess by this stage, you've started to think, well, maybe what about some numbers on this? Again, it was mentioned earlier, looking at a sort of 5-year plan, as it were. So we've projected figures, as you would expect us to have done. So if I just pick out some of the figures for 5 years, so total assets here of 587 million. When you look at the total profit and loss here, it's actually extremely good for the turnover. And that's because we're benefiting from what I've said already about fintech. We will have low fixed costs, but therefore very high margins. That, coupled with the base in Grenada, with the low tax benefits, etc., means that as a bank, it will be a very profitable bank. I'm sorry, I haven't kept up with the slides. Oh, by a long way. Oh, sorry. Okay. So, in order to make sure that the bank is safe and secure, we also haven't focused just very tightly on one individual aspect, one pillar, as it were. What we've looked at is how are we going to divide our business, where is that business going to come from, and what do we expect to turn over in each of those sectors. So fiduciary and trust services, we're projecting a turnover of 1 billion by the end of year 5. In terms of acquiring e-commerce and gambling, again, also around the 1 billion mark. Likewise, in foreign exchange, cryptocurrency, bitcoins, about 1 billion. So you're starting to see that one sector isn't totally all that the bank is going to be focused on. We're going to be looking at providing different sectors which gives us greater depth, greater strength, but also a broader range of services. P2P lending, because of its importance, 1.25 billion. It's just a market that is set to grow more rapidly, and so us to be able to get a percentage of a market that is growing even more rapidly. And then brokerage and wire transfer of £500 million. So again, broadly 5 sort of pillars that are all supporting the overall base, as it were. And we're going to achieve all of that by investing significantly, specifically in technology, which won't be a surprise to any of you after what I was saying earlier. But technology and software. But the important thing is we will be investing in the best systems and cutting-edge technology. And that will enable us to do all of these things and provide the level of service at the level of cost and to obtain the percentage of the market share that we're projecting. As you would expect, we will have a fully developed risk management framework, well-experienced, fully integrated risk management system, looking at controlling all of those risks. And we'll be looking at avoiding risks for ourselves as the bank and, of course, ourselves as the clients. So controlling our risks and their risks in all of the ways that we need to do in terms of hedging, but also in terms of control and systems and back office functions. And then, of course, again, what you would imagine is a full know your customer, anti-money laundering type framework, which is required everywhere in the world nowadays. So simply making sure that we know our customer from the legal due diligence point of view, but also that we know our customer, as I've said again and again, what they want, how we can deliver it to them, how can we make it better, how can we make them want to come to us so that they help us to grow our bank. So let's summarize the benefits, I guess. Again, let's tie it back into the very beginning of the day. It's a very, very logical step for AGAM to set up its own bank. We've got to that stage now where it's a necessary step, I would suggest. And if we're going to do that, let's not set up an old-fashioned bank. Let's not set up something half-hearted. If we're going to do it, let's do it properly. And let's play to all the advantages and use all of the knowledge that we have to maximize the benefits for each and every one of us. So we're going to be using fintech. We're going to be using some of the old-style private banking type approach, but most importantly, with all of the advantages of fintech and using the new style mental approach, as it were, of, as I say, identifying what the client wants and how we're going to achieve it. So I hope you found that quite interesting. And, well, let's look forward to the next year or so, and AGB will be up and running and will be able to deliver all of the services I've just been telling you about. Thank you.